Welcome into the Roll Tide Rewind. We have two very special guests here today. We have Doeren and Kerry Miller of the Unnamed Bracketology podcast. Guys, how are y'all doing today?
Can't complain. Let's talk some
Good.
Bama.
Let's talk some Bama. Well, if you're anybody interested in these guys, you'll find them on Unnamed Bracketology podcast on YouTube. Graham Doeren also has that on Twitter. But these are two great bracketologists. If you ever want to listen to, they post a video almost every single day talking about different conferences, and it's a really good listen to have. But we're going to dive into Alabama. Alabama has had their stretches lately. They've been, dinged by injuries. They've had the first ranked strength of schedule by KenPom. But as you see these rankings from Evan Maya to, I'll ignore the AP poll, but from Evan Maya to the net ranking, we're kind of in the 18 to 23 range. What is y'all's assessment on Alabama so far this season? Kerry, we'll start with you.
I think you hit the nail on the head by ignoring the AP poll. We are ready to talk bracketology now, if you're going to throw that out immediately, because it is garbage. But the strength of schedule, that's seems to be every single year. Nate Oates puts together this ridiculous schedule. Then there's no days off in the SEC. I mean, it's not as deep as last year, not as top heavy either. But I mean, even home games against South Carolina are no joke. So, you expect Alabama to be a top 5 strength of schedule team kind of every year. And I think these metrics, 18 through 23 feels about right, maybe a little bit low as far as seeding is concerned, but I think it's a testament to where they are. They're right around 20th in the nation.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the committee has an interesting choice. Alabama, I think, has shown that's probably about where they're at as far as quality of team. But I think they've got some really good wins that the committee, if they want to, can move them up that bracket. So at Auburn was obviously a nice win, but it's really at St. John's and neutral against Illinois. Those are the two wins that I think can move the needle for Alabama compared to the rest of the teams they're going against for the 4 and the 5 seed line. So I actually have Alabama up to a 4. We'll kind of get there a little bit later on, but a really interesting profile because scheduling tough out of conference can really pay off.
Yeah, and you can even see on this graphic right here, they've played 12 quad 1 games, and I think there's going to be potential for at least 2 to 3 more with going at Tennessee, playing Arkansas, and then also playing Auburn again, and then also going at Georgia as well. So there's opportunities, but definitely the back half is a little less havoc than the front half, which we'll get to later on. But yeah, Graham, we'll go to the seed lines real quick, like you were mentioning. You released this yesterday on Super Bowl Sunday. Alabama you have as the 14 overall seed. Kerry, I watched the episode yesterday. You have Alabama as the 19 overall seed, which would put them at the 5 seed line. So that's basically what I've been seeing a lot from all the bracketologists and stuff is the 4 or 5 seed line seeds seem to be the most popular place for Alabama. So, Graham, why would you have Alabama at 14 above teams like Vandy who beat Alabama or like, say, a North Carolina who just got a great win against Duke?
Yeah, I mean, North Carolina has a terrific road win at Virginia, so they do have one very nice win away from home, but they don't have 2. You look at Vandy, what have they done away from home? Beat UCF on the road? That doesn't move the needle for me. I don't think it would move the needle for the committee either. Bama having those 2 wins away from home over St. John's and Illinois, I do think those are really important. And you add at Auburn as a third, at Auburn is a better win than Vandy going to UCF. So I think you start to look at the quality of the wins that Alabama has. That's what really moves the needle for me.
How about you, Kerry?
Yeah, I think, as you said, I landed with them at 19. And I'm not going to argue with Graham. I think 14 is a fair assessment of them. I mean, they're like 12th or 13th in all of the resume metrics. So KPI, SOR, wins above bubble. And we know how important wins above bubble is. I think those resume metrics are certainly more important than the quality metrics or predictive metrics, whichever you want to call them. I think there's been kind of a growing trend in recent years that people will say they use the resume metrics for selection, but then they'll focus more on the quality metrics for seeding. I don't think there's much to that. If anything, I think the resume metrics are even more important. So you could definitely argue I'm a little bit low on Alabama. I can't imagine getting them down to like the 6 line. I don't know if anybody out there has them that low, but 4 or 5 definitely feels about right now. They've done a fair amount of damage, to Graham's point, away from home. And I mean, you said it's not as backloaded, but they do still have opportunities to really boost that resume. I mean, even the game at Ole Miss, like that's a borderline quad 1, quad 2 game. The game at LSU, that's one they should win, but that's a quad 1 game. So, you got to drill down into the actual games. But if we're going to look at the quadrant records, they're probably going to look even stronger when all is said and done.
Yeah, and another thing, so if Alabama say they're at the 14 seed, like where Graham has them, what realistic chance does Alabama have of getting to a 3 seed line? Because I don't know, compared to last year, I feel like the top 3 seeds are very, very strong this year. Because I feel like last year the top 6 overall seeds, like it was like Auburn, Florida, Houston, Duke, and then Tennessee, Alabama were all very strong and very ahead of the pack. Whereas this year, I feel like it's a cluster of a lot of good teams. Do you think Alabama would have a shot to be in 3 seed? Because Michigan State seems like a really good basketball team. Florida just beat Alabama by over 20 points. Purdue's already beaten Alabama. Kansas with Darren Peterson, he looks incredible. So what chance would Alabama have of getting to that 3 line? What would have to happen? Would marbles have to fall in the right places? What would you think, Graham? I'll start with you first.
Well, I don't think it will take anything crazy. And that's the good news for Alabama. I mean, even looking at that 3 seed line, I'll just say Purdue, regardless of their resume, they don't look right to me. I really just don't think they're playing well. So I could easily see Purdue just falling off aside from any of the remaining games they have. I could just see them falling off. Florida looks fantastic, so I would not count on passing the Gators. If anything, I think they're headed further up the bracket. But I'll get on the other 2 teams' schedules a little bit. Michigan State already has their big home games past them. That's done. Now they got to go on the road. I think Michigan State not having a win over a tournament team on the road is a major concern, and I don't really see them picking up one, at least a big one. If they get one, I don't think it's going to be, getting that big Michigan road win that they've got coming up or at Purdue. I don't think that's coming for Michigan State. So I do think Michigan State's probably eventually going to fall off the 3 line, and I think Kansas has a really important game tonight. If they beat Arizona at home, I think they're probably going to stick on those top 3 seed lines. But that's hard. Arizona's 23-0. If they lose that, they go to Arizona. So they could potentially should have 2 losses there if they lose tonight. They go to Iowa State as well, and they get Houston at home. So there's a lot of potential losses coming down the road for Kansas. Maybe due to not being a bad team, just really tough schedule. So I look at Alabama as just if they win a lot of games, they've already got those big wins away from home already stored. If they just win from here on out, I think Alabama's got a great shot at the 3 line.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. And I think specifically on Michigan State, right? If they had lost that game to Illinois the other day, we didn't know who we were going to have at the bottom of the 3 line. And even the Spartans are a little bit suspect there. I mean, their resume is fine, but they dropped those home games to Duke and Michigan, and they've missed on some big opportunities. I think they need to prove that they belong on the 3 line. And I think, unless they get those road wins over Michigan and Purdue, to Graham's point, Alabama could just leapfrog Michigan State just by picking up quality wins the rest of the way. Now, there's not, outside of games against Florida, there's not a whole lot in the SEC this year to get you to go on a quick boost. So I think that could maybe hold them back a little bit. But I mean, if they were to, go, what do they have, 7 games left? They go 6-1 down the stretch and then win the SEC tournament. I think even a 2 seed could still be in play.
Nice. I wouldn't point fingers about that. But last question on this slide. Say Alabama gets a 3, 4, or 5 seed. What 4, 5, or 6 seed on that list would be probably the team you would want to avoid playing, say, in this round of 32? So say if Alabama was a 4 seed, who would you not want the 5 seed to be? Kerry, I'll start with you. Who would you want to try to avoid out of those cluster of 3 through 6 right there?
I mean, I would think St. John's would be pretty brutal for Alabama at this point in time, just how strong that Johnny's front court is looking and how susceptible Alabama's front court is, even with Bediako in there. But I think that's really what you're looking for. You're going to expect Holloway and Philon to win just about any battle, certainly in the 4 through 5 that type of seed range. I think you're going to have the backcourt battle won in that one. It's just, can you overcome the front court deficiency at that point? I think St. John's is probably most likely to capitalize on that.
Yeah, I would say Texas Tech, for similar reasons, would be a really tough matchup because Texas Tech has good front court play, but they also shoot the three a ton. I think that could be real trouble for Alabama.
Yeah, JT Topin is the real deal. I really wanted him to transfer a few years ago, but we got Clifford Amore, so I won't complain. He was pretty good too. So yeah, I was just looking at it. Like, Alabama's played Arizona, they've played Illinois, they've played Purdue, they've played Florida, they've played Gonzaga, they've played Vandy, they've played Tennessee, they've played St. John's, they've played Kentucky, they're about to play Arkansas, and they played Clemson. So just a very, very, very tough schedule that Alabama has played so far. But credit to Nate, that strength of schedule, the committee seems to have loved that over the last few years. We'll move into the big bracket here. Alabama, for people that maybe can't see, they're in right here playing in-state Troy in the first round, and then also with Virginia as the 5 seed. I guess the next follow-up to that question that I asked would be, if you're the 4 or 5 seed, if you get out of that like weekend, you go to the Sweet 16 and you're probably playing a 1 seed. What 1 seed should Alabama probably want to avoid? Because honestly, I know this is weird to say, but out of those 4 1 seeds, UConn is probably the one I would want to play. I know that sounds crazy because I don't really want to play UConn, but between Duke with them Boozer, Arizona's already decimated Alabama this year, and then Michigan has been, I think Ken Pom still has them as the best team. But UConn, they have their deficiencies. I've watched their last few games. They've lost. They got really close last weekend, I believe. I forgot who it was against, but they had a close call. Who would you say is the 1 seed you probably would want to avoid, but like a 1 seed you would prefer to have?
I'll say I agree with you. The 1 seed you want to face is UConn. I think they're definitely the weakest of the bunch. I do think Alabama's backcourt could kind of put Duke in a locker a little bit. Like, I don't think Duke's backcourt is Final Four caliber, to be honest. And I have a Coach K thing behind me. Like, I'm not a Duke hater by any means. But the thought of Philon and Holloway going up against Caden Boozer and Caleb Foster and Isaiah Evans is a little terrifying to me. But I think you definitely want to avoid Michigan. I think that would be a nightmare. If Elliot Cadeau is doing anything whatsoever in that game, I don't know if Alabama could overcome the Wolverines.
Yeah, I was going to say Arizona is the one team I really wouldn't want to play. I kind of disagree with Kerry a little bit there. I think if I was Alabama, I would probably prefer to play Michigan over Duke if it came down to those two. But the one I really wouldn't want to play is Arizona because, man, we talked about front court issues. I would not want to be playing that Arizona front court. But I will say UConn, to me, is the clear weakest number 1 seed this year. If these 4 end up being the number 1 seeds, it'll be interesting though, because I got my eye on Houston. I think they might be the ones that move up and replace UConn on the 1 line.
Do you think like Iowa State and Illinois would have a chance to pop up to that 1 line? It seems like Illinois is getting hot at the right time.
Yeah, I think certainly Illinois and Iowa State could do it. Illinois would have had a much better chance of doing it had they finished out that Michigan State game in East Lansing. Without doing that, I think the path is pretty difficult, mainly because Iowa State and Houston both have 2 losses. So now you're looking at the Big 12. Arizona seems like a very good bet for a 1 seed. And now either Houston or Iowa State with 2 losses, now it doesn't take one of them being perfect. Just, one of them can lose a game or 2 and still looking at like a 4-loss team coming out of a really tough Big 12. I think there's a very good shot, the Big 12, whether it's Houston or Iowa State. I would favor Houston of the 2. I think there's a good shot one of those 2 teams does end up replacing UConn on the 1 line.
Yeah, I think either Iowa State or Illinois could do it. But because they're all going to have their opportunities, but Houston in particular, they've got a stretch coming up. I think it's at Iowa State versus Arizona, at Kansas. And if they were to win all 3 of those, they could vault straight to number 1 overall seed. So it just depends which of those current 2 seeds take advantage of their opportunities. But if any of them do, they're going to pick up plenty of quality wins to bypass Connecticut, who just does not have the opportunities to get those wins in the Big East. I think there will be eventually some team, now that Connecticut lost that game at St. John's, that it'll just get to a point where there's so many quad 1A wins on either Houston's or Illinois' resume that you just can't even deny them that spot if Connecticut loses even one more time.
Yeah. And what 12 and 13 seeds should Alabama like, every year I feel like there's just one upset, maybe two. Last year, 12 seed McNeese State beat Clemson as a 5, and then the year before, or maybe in the year before that, Furman as a 13 beat Virginia in the final seconds. So these upsets happen. It's what everybody loves March for. What 12, 13 seed should Alabama be hoping to avoid? Because even in Alabama's Final Four run, 13 seed was Charleston. Alabama did really well against them, but the next round, Grand Canyon was a 12. They beat the 5 seed St. Mary's, and that was probably Alabama's, not saying it was their toughest game because they had to beat 1 seed North Carolina, the Nets game, but that was a very, very tough game for Alabama against the 12 seed Grand Canyon team. What 12, 13 seed should Alabama be hoping probably to avoid?
Graham,
well, I'm going to go with, I'll go with Belmont. I actually thought it was hilarious when I put this bracket together. I don't try to create matchups. I really don't. But sometimes you see them like, man, if I had to double check, I was like, am I sure Vandy didn't play Belmont this year? Because it seems like they should have played each other, but I would not want to be Vandy going up against Belmont. That would be the number one team on those 12 and 13 lines that I would not want to draw.
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, Liberty's super efficient on offense. Belmont is. Tulsa, like they're all kind of similar teams. They're like they score at a high level, but they don't play great defense. So I feel like Alabama should be able to run away from any of them. But that's why they're 12 seeds, right? They're not. You're not expecting them to be these elite teams. But yeah, I would probably go with Belmont. Would be the toughest matchup.
Okay. I believe this is the Saturday where the committee releases their top 16 seeds. It's either this Saturday or next Saturday. I forget which one it is. Last year on the calendar, it was this upcoming Saturday, but the committee will come out, a month or so before the brackets release, and they'll release their top 16 seeds at what's happened so far. In the past few years when they've done that, how do you adjust your bracket to what the committee says in February, or do you just keep it as is? Graham?
Yeah, I think for me, when I'm looking at how to adjust that, I start making moves immediately. So I know a lot of bracketologists will be like, no, I'm keeping them in these exact spots because that's where the committee had them today. I'm like, and then we just had a Saturday of college basketball. To me, it's almost like you throw most of it out immediately because a Saturday of college basketball changes everything as far as I'm concerned. The only thing I really pay attention to was there one or two particular teams that weren't really where I was expecting. I remember the committee a couple of years ago talking about San Diego State barely being outside the top 4 seed lines, and that really caught me off guard because I was not expecting to hear San Diego State's name mentioned. So that was one that I kept in my, the back pocket for the full year. When the actual bracket came out, I see them a little bit higher than I was expecting just for that reason.
Yeah, I don't really adjust much. I mean, I like to predict what they're going to do, and usually I think with the top 16, there's not a whole lot of like in the final bracket, pretty much everybody's going to get the 1 seeds. Maybe you'll invert the bottom 3 and the top 4 or something, but this top 16, they usually end up being somewhat clear cut in the end. And even on the, this early release, and it's not this Saturday, it's the following Saturday. And we were surprised by that because it's usually the first Saturday after the Super Bowl, but I guess they pushed it back because, Graham's suspicion is because of the Trae Young year that they almost, they were 16 overall or something, that they almost fell all the way out, and they didn't want to do that. So they're pushing it back as long as they can. I don't know, but yeah, I don't adjust much based on that. But to Graham's point, I do the same thing. Like they go through that process the Tuesday and Wednesday really leading up to that release on Saturday morning. And then by the end of the day on Saturday, all of the resumes have changed to some extent. So, I'll put my seeds for that morning as they have them, and then I'll just adjust accordingly from there.
I gotcha. Well, this is the rest of the schedule that we were talking about a little bit ago. These are the net rankings. And like I said, this is just a very much difference from the first half of the season to now. Ole Miss is 83rd. It's still not a gimme to win at Ole Miss. Ole Miss has still played a few teams close, much better teams like Kentucky, and I think they were close with Vandy as well. South Carolina, Arkansas has had some great wins this year. At LSU, like you said, it would qualify as a quad one win. Mississippi State, Alabama's already beaten them. At Tennessee, Alabama's already lost to Tennessee earlier this year. And then at Georgia, and then a team in Auburn, they already beat just this past Saturday. So for Alabama, like you said, we talked about earlier, to stay on the 4 seed line, to even potentially go to the 3 seed line, what do they have to do with this schedule? Like realistically, I mean, you can also say they go, 8-0, but what would be like if you're going to stay on that 4 seed line, what do you need to do for this schedule? We'll start with you, Kerry.
I mean, I think 6-2 keeps them where they are. 7-1 gets them in the mix for a 3 seed, and 8-0 they could be a 2 seed. I mean, I'm not looking at their specific wins above bubble numbers right now, but that's just kind of what my gut says. Because if they go 6-2, right, either they're probably losing right at Tennessee, at Georgia, but still picking up nice home wins over Arkansas and Auburn. Like that's going to keep the status quo. I think they'll be fine. But again, we'll see. Maybe North Carolina picks up some more great wins and jumps over them, or maybe who else is in that mix? Texas Tech goes on a run. So it's all relative, but yeah, I think 6-2 probably keeps them steady.
Yeah, I think 6-2 is probably the steady state. The interesting thing for me is it really comes down to your analysis of what Alabama's done so far. If you think they're a 4 seed right now, it's going to be hard to hold a 4 seed with 6-2. If you think they're a 5 seed, it's like, yeah, perfect. That should hold you steady. Because I look at this schedule and I think at Tennessee, very tough game. At Georgia's like, I mean, for a quad 1A game, it's probably about as easy as it gets, to be honest.
Yep.
So like I'm looking at that, and if that's your second toughest game remaining, that's a schedule where there's probably some other teams like we already talked about, just Arizona and Houston and Iowa State and Kansas playing each other. Like there's going to be some big wins coming up in some other conferences. So I think if you want to be a top 4 seed, it's either 6-2 with a win at Tennessee, or it's probably 7-1 but losing the Tennessee game.
With Alabama adding Bediako, I think they're supposed to decide today if he's allowed to play or not. I haven't seen anything on that, but we'll just assume that he's going to play. But with him, it helped Alabama's depth in the front court extremely well. Like it was Aiden Sherrill and then really nobody else. Alabama kind of missed on the portal class this year. Noah Williamson has been a big miss. He was a Patriot League Player of the Year. He just, whenever he gets minutes, it's usually just a disaster, except for the Kentucky game. He had the game of his life against Kentucky, but other than that, that's the only game he really has showed up in. And then also Jalil Bethea, he's a guard, but he was a former 5-star recruit. He hasn't really hit from transfer. And then we've just, been hit with injuries, 75 games this year missed by scholarship players. And we still have, 8 games left. But with Bediako on the team now, and hopefully you get Holloway and Philon healthy. Reitzel was reported today as his foot injury was not serious, so he should be a go for Wednesday. But if Alabama can be somewhat healthy, which is a hard ask, and with Bediako, what is the ceiling for Alabama in the NCAA tournament? I'll start with you, Graham.
I see no reason they can't go to a Final Four. I'm not saying it'll be easy, but tell me a team that can score like that can't make a Final Four. Of course they can. And I think oftentimes when we look at teams that can go deep in the tournament, we get caught in this idea of like, well, how do you win 6 straight? And it's like, well, there's a certain extent to that. But then there's also the reality that if you're a high seed, like if Alabama lands a 4 seed, they're playing a 13 in the first game. They should win that. If the 5 ends up dropping a game to the 12, which is entirely realistic, happens all the time, potentially you're looking at beating a 13 seed and a 12 seed. You don't have to play particularly well to be in the Sweet 16 if you're Alabama. So I don't always look at it as like have to play well 4 straight games. You might just be able to be lucky. Like maybe Alabama's playing somebody who's just having an off shooting day. That happens all the time in college basketball. You need to play well at the right specific times. I see no reason Alabama can't go to a Final Four.
Yeah, I think it's plausible, but I don't think their defense is good enough, just historically speaking. Like that Miami team a few years ago that crashed the Final Four. They were, I think, just barely top 100 on adjusted defensive efficiency on KenPom, and they were like the first team ever to make that run from outside, I think, the top 75 on defense, and that's around where Alabama is now. I think we see a lot of these teams. There's probably 3 or 4 teams every year that are like top 10 offense and barely top 100 defense. And we always say, like, yeah, if they get hot, they could win it all. And eventually they just run into a game where they can't stop anything. And I think that's what I'm more so concerned with Alabama than their depth or their injuries is just their defense in general. I think that giving up 100 points in that game against Florida was not exactly an outlier of what could be their future. But if Philon and Holloway are doing their thing, yeah, I mean, they could be an Elite Eight team. Maybe they catch a break, make a Final Four.
Yeah, and a good point right there, because in Alabama's Final Four year, they were a 4 seed. They got to play a 13. They Grand Canyon won their 12 seed matchup against St. Mary's, so Alabama got to play a 13 and a 12. Then they got to play North Carolina, and R.J. Davis had his worst shooting night of the year. He was, I think, the ACC – well, it was either him or Baycott was the ACC player of the year, but R.J. Davis was like 1 of 17 from the court. Alabama also got lucky in the Elite Eight. They didn't have to play Arizona. They got to play the 6 seed Clemson. And then they made the Final Four, and they just, ran into a battering ram. You run into UConn. That UConn team with Donovan Clingan was an unmatchable team. So you got to tip your cap making the Final Four and then, giving UConn a shot. That's all you really can do. But I appreciate you guys joining on the show. Where can we listen to y'all's content again, Graham?
Go on YouTube and search for the Unnamed Bracketology podcast. You can also find us on YouTube Music going that way. But if you go on Twitter, you can find at Kerry. Well, I guess it's at Kerrance Miller.
At Kerrance James.
At Kerrance James. That's what it is. But you can also search Kerry Miller for him or Graham Doeren for me, and you can find us there.
Alrighty. Well, I appreciate you guys for joining. Thank you guys for watching on YouTube. I hope everyone has a great rest of their week, and roll Tide.